Most men think a hug is harmless. But sometimes, the way you hug a woman instantly changes how she feels about you emotionally. And the strange part is most men never realize they're quietly destroying attraction through something that feels completely normal. Especially rule number 4, because once you understand it, you'll never look at physical connection the same way again. Here's the truth nobody talks about. Women don't experience touch the same way men do. For many women, a hug is not just physical contact. It's emotional information. It communicates confidence, insecurity, emotional awareness, social intelligence, boundaries, pressure, comfort, and intention all at once. That means the wrong hug can silently create discomfort even if your words sound perfect. And the right hug? It can create emotional warmth without you saying much at all. Pay attention to this part because most men completely misunderstand female psychology here. Women are highly sensitive to emotional energy during physical interactions. Not just what you do, but how you do it. Your timing, your pressure, your body language, your emotional state. All of it gets noticed subconsciously. That's why two men can hug the same woman in almost identical ways, yet create completely different emotional reactions. One feels calming, the other feels uncomfortable. And most of the time, the difference is psychological, not physical. Now let's talk about the first mistake men make. Stop hugging her like you're trying to prove something. Most men don't realize this, but insecurity often leaks through physical behavior. A man who hugs too aggressively, too tightly, or too long sometimes communicates emotional neediness instead of confidence. And women can feel that instantly. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how some hugs feel relaxed and natural while others feel strangely forced? That's because emotionally grounded people don't use physical touch to seek reassurance. But emotionally uncertain people often do it unconsciously. And here's where it gets interesting. A woman can often sense whether your hug comes from calm confidence or emotional hunger. If you hold too tightly because you're nervous about losing the moment, she feels the pressure emotionally. If your body language says, "Please validate me," the interaction quietly loses emotional ease. Confidence doesn't grip desperately. It relaxes. That changes everything. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. That's where many men misunderstand the lesson. Some guys hear this and suddenly become robotic, afraid to show warmth. But emotional warmth is attractive. Forced intensity is not. There's a huge difference. A confident hug feels natural, respectful, and emotionally present. It doesn't rush. It doesn't cling. It doesn't secretly ask for reassurance underneath the physical contact. And women notice that immediately. Here's a simple scenario. Imagine a man greeting a woman after a date. He pulls her into a hug too suddenly, holds too long, and seems emotionally over-invested in the interaction. Even if he means well, the emotional pressure becomes noticeable. Now compare that to a man who hugs calmly, comfortably, and without hidden tension. His body language says, "I enjoy your presence," not, "I desperately need this moment." Which one feels emotionally safer? Usually the second. Because attraction grows best in relaxed emotional space, not pressure. Now here comes rule number 2. Stop hugging her without reading emotional timing first. This is where social intelligence becomes incredibly important. Most men focus only on whether a hug is technically acceptable. But women often respond more strongly to emotional timing than physical action itself. A hug at the wrong emotional moment can feel awkward, even if the gesture itself is harmless. Timing changes emotional meaning. Most men don't realize this. A woman may enjoy hugging you in one moment and feel uncomfortable in another, depending on emotional connection, environment, mood, stress level, or social setting. That's why emotionally intelligent men pay attention before initiating physical contact. Not because they're weak, because awareness is attractive. Pay attention to this carefully. Women constantly observe whether a man notices subtle emotional cues. Does he recognize comfort levels? Does he understand emotional pacing? Or does he move physically based only on his own desires? That distinction matters deeply in female psychology because emotional awareness creates trust, and trust amplifies attraction. Now, here's the mistake many men make. They assume confidence means ignoring hesitation. But real confidence actually notices discomfort without becoming insecure about it. That's emotional maturity. Imagine this situation. A woman seems distracted, stressed, emotionally distant, or socially reserved in a particular moment. But the man still forces physical closeness because he wants reassurance or emotional connection right now. Instantly, the interaction feels emotionally misaligned. Not because he's a bad person, because he prioritized his emotional needs over emotional awareness. And women feel that. Meanwhile, emotionally intelligent men move slower. They read body language, eye contact, tone shifts, comfort levels. They understand that attraction often grows through emotional calibration, not rushing. That's why subtle social intelligence is incredibly attractive. It makes women feel emotionally seen instead of emotionally managed. Now let's move into rule number 3 because this is where many men unknowingly destroy emotional tension. Stop turning every hug into a relationship signal. Most men never think about this consciously, but women often associate emotional meaning with physical consistency. If every interaction becomes overly physical too quickly, emotional mystery disappears, and attraction needs space to breathe. Here's where it gets fascinating psychologically. Human beings value emotional pacing. Anticipation creates emotional energy. But when a man constantly pushes physical closeness at every opportunity, interactions begin feeling predictable instead of emotionally dynamic. Women notice this faster than men think. A hug should feel connected to the moment, not mechanically expected every single time. Otherwise, physical connection loses emotional depth and starts feeling performative. Think about the difference. One man hugs because the emotional moment naturally called for connection. Another hugs automatically because he thinks physical contact always increases attraction. The first feels authentic. The second feels calculated. And women instinctively separate the two. This is why emotionally grounded men rarely force escalation. They understand something most men miss completely. Attraction is emotional before it's physical. That means the emotional atmosphere surrounding touch matters more than touch itself. A short, sincere hug with emotional presence often feels stronger than extended physical closeness filled with nervous energy. Women remember emotional feeling more than physical duration. That's powerful. Now here's the part many men overlook. Women often feel safest around men who are emotionally comfortable without constantly needing physical reassurance. If a man seems unable to interact warmly unless physical contact is involved, women sometimes interpret that as emotional dependence rather than strength. And emotional dependence weakens attraction quickly because emotionally secure people don't constantly seek confirmation through physical interaction. Now, before we reach rule number 4, understand this deeply. The goal is not avoiding hugs. The goal is understanding emotional communication. That changes everything. Because once you realize touch communicates psychology, your awareness changes completely. Suddenly, you notice energy, comfort, timing, emotional tension, relaxation, presence. And women notice that shift immediately. Now let's get to rule number 4, because this is the one most men completely miss. Stop hugging her while emotionally disconnected. This sounds strange at first, but pay close attention. Some men use physical touch as a substitute for emotional presence. Their body is physically there, but emotionally they're distracted, performative, anxious, or focused only on outcome. And women often feel that emotional emptiness instantly. A disconnected hug feels hollow, even if technically everything looks normal. Here's where it gets interesting. Women are often extremely sensitive to emotional congruence. In simple terms, they notice whether your physical behavior matches your emotional state. If you hug confidently but internally feel tense, approval-seeking, distracted, or emotionally absent, the interaction quietly loses authenticity. Energy matters more than technique. Most men don't realize this. That's why some hugs feel unforgettable, despite lasting only seconds. Not because of physical intensity, because emotional presence was genuine. The person felt calm, grounded, attentive, emotionally available in that exact moment. And female psychology responds strongly to emotional authenticity. Now think about your own experiences for a second. Have you ever shaken someone's hand and instantly felt warmth, sincerity, calmness, or tension without them saying anything? Human beings constantly communicate emotional information physically. Hugs simply amplify that communication more deeply, which means women often sense your emotional condition before your words ever fully register. That's why emotionally distracted men accidentally create awkward interactions, even when they're trying hard to appear confident. Their body says one thing, their energy says another, and humans trust energy first. Pay attention to this carefully, because this insight changes social dynamics entirely. Women are not just evaluating physical behavior, they're evaluating emotional safety. Does your presence feel calm, respectful, aware, genuine, or does it feel emotionally chaotic underneath the surface? That subconscious evaluation happens fast, very fast. Now here's the irony. The men who create the most natural attraction are usually not obsessing over physical techniques constantly. They're emotionally present, relaxed, grounded. They enjoy the interaction instead of mentally chasing results. And because they're calm internally, physical connection feels calmer externally too. That's what women respond to. Not perfection. Presence. Most men think attraction is about doing more. More touching, more impressing, more escalating. But often attraction deepens when interactions feel emotionally effortless instead of strategically forced. That's where emotional intelligence becomes magnetic. Now let's go even deeper, because this explains why some men unintentionally make women uncomfortable without understanding why. Women often experience physical interactions through emotional context, meaning the same hug can feel comforting from one man and uncomfortable from another, depending on emotional trust, timing, confidence, awareness, and social calibration. That's why memorizing behaviors never works long term, because psychology matters more than formulas. Here's a real life example. A man greets a woman after not seeing her for weeks. Instead of reading her energy first, he immediately forces overly intimate physical closeness because he assumes attraction requires constant physical expression. She smiles politely, but emotionally pulls back internally. Why? Because the interaction prioritized his assumptions over emotional awareness. Now compare that to another man who reads the emotional atmosphere first. He notices her mood. He slows down. His body language feels calm, warm, socially intelligent. The hug happens naturally instead of forcefully. completely different emotional outcome. And the physical action itself wasn't even dramatically different. That's the power of emotional calibration. Most men don't realize women are constantly asking themselves subconscious questions during interactions. Does this feel safe? Does this feel genuine? Does this feel pressured? Does this man understand emotional boundaries? Those questions quietly shape attraction more than most men imagine. Now, here's something fascinating. Emotionally secure men rarely obsess over whether every hug worked. They don't treat physical connection like a performance review. That relaxed mindset actually makes them more attractive because their behavior feels emotionally natural rather than outcome dependent. Women can feel when a man desperately wants physical moments to validate his worth. And they can also feel when a man simply enjoys connection without emotional desperation attached to it. That distinction changes everything. Now let's talk briefly about something subtle but important. Stillness. Most men move too fast, emotionally and physically, because nervousness creates urgency. But emotionally grounded men understand the power of calm pacing. They don't rush interactions. They don't overcompensate with intensity. Their movements feel intentional instead of anxious. That calmness communicates confidence powerfully, especially to women, because emotional steadiness creates psychological comfort, and psychological comfort creates attraction. Here's where many viewers may misunderstand this video. So listen carefully. This is not about becoming overly analytical or afraid of touch. That's not confidence either. The deeper message is awareness, emotional intelligence, understanding that physical connection carries emotional meaning, whether you intend it or not. And once you understand that, your entire social presence changes. You stop chasing reactions. You stop forcing moments. You stop using touch to seek reassurance. Instead, physical connection becomes calmer, more authentic, more emotionally aligned. That's what women actually respond to. Not exaggerated confidence, not aggressive behavior, not performance, real emotional presence. And ironically, the less desperate a man becomes for physical validation, the more emotionally attractive he usually feels. Because calm men create calm interactions. Grounded men create emotional ease. Aware men create trust. That's rare today. Very rare. Especially in a world where many people rush intimacy while completely ignoring emotional connection underneath it. But women notice the difference immediately. They notice the man who respects emotional timing. They notice the man who feels socially aware instead of emotionally pushy. They notice the man whose confidence feels relaxed rather than performative. And most importantly, they notice the man whose physical presence feels emotionally safe instead of emotionally demanding. That's the real secret, hidden underneath all four rules. A hug is never just a hug psychologically. It's emotional communication. And once you truly understand that, your interactions stop feeling forced and start feeling naturally attractive. Not because you learned some manipulative trick, but because you became more emotionally aware as a man. Most men never reach that level, but the ones who do, women feel the difference almost instantly. So the next time you hug someone, stop thinking only about physical contact. Pay attention to something deeper instead. What emotional experience does your presence create? Because that answer shapes attraction far more than most men will ever realize.